I caught my wife's lover giving her a wedding ring during their romantic dinner. So I went to them and said, "Marry him, but don't come after me anymore and don't even want to see my children, you just destroyed everything." She was desperate. There was a suffocating silence. The restaurant, once full of murmurs and clinking glasses, was now frozen in time. People's eyes turned to me, to her, to him. I saw mouths opening, eyes shifting, some pretending not to see, but I knew everyone was witnessing my downfall. And there, in front of everyone, I watched the moment my life fell apart. The wine in the glass shook in my hand, the blood pulsed in my ears, and the only thing I could hear was my own voice echoing off the restaurant walls. The woman I loved, the woman I built a family with, who shared years of stories with me, was now sitting across from another man, receiving a ring as if I had never existed. My chest burned, my breathing failed, and for a moment, I felt like I was outside my own body, looking at that scene as if I were a spectator of my own tragedy. Her eyes widened. The shock on her face was almost theatrical. His mouth opened slightly, his eyes glistening with moisture, his hands trembling on the table. "No, it's not what you think." She tried to get up, tried to hold my hand, but I backed away. My heart was racing in my chest, not with love, not with desire, but with fury and disappointment. I've believed her so many times, I've apologized for small mistakes, I've given second chances for misplaced words, but now I had no more room for doubt. Her lover, sitting there, still holding the damn box, looked at me with a strange expression, a mix of guilt and defiance. How dare he? How did he have the courage to look me in the eye, knowing he was destroying my family? My fist clenched at my side, I could finish him right there, I could crush that face of superiority that he insisted on showing, but I wasn't going to give him that pleasure. He deserved nothing but my contempt. "You can't forbid me from seeing my children." Her voice was low, broken. But I just laughed, a bitter laugh, the laugh of someone who has lost everything and no longer cares about the rules of the game. "I can and I will." I had never felt so angry and so cold at the same time. She didn't deserve to be in their lives. Not after that. Not after choosing another man, while I dedicated myself entirely to this family. You chose this path. Now, bear the consequences. The restaurant began to gain sounds again, muffled whispers, glances that fled and returned. I didn't care anymore. I was finished, but I wouldn't be the only one to pay for it. I turned my back, without looking back, and left knowing that that would be the last time I would see her as my wife. I walked outside, but inside me, something was dying and being reborn at the same time. I didn't know what my life would become from then on, but one thing I was sure of, she would lose much more than me. The next few hours were a blur. I locked myself in the house, walked around, ran my hands through my hair, trying to understand how everything got to this point. When did she start cheating on me? When did my marriage become a lie? I remembered the years by her side, the moments when I trusted her blindly, the times I arrived tired from work and she greeted me with a smile, as if everything was fine. But now I saw everything differently. Now, all those nights she was on her cell phone, all the lame excuses, all the sudden mood swings, it all made sense. I was an idiot for not seeing it sooner. But I wasn't the only one suffering in this story. Our children. My children. How was I going to explain this to them? How was I going to look at them and tell them that the mother they loved, the mother they trusted, was a traitor? My stomach turned just thinking about it. I knew I needed to be strong, that I needed to find a way to protect the children from all this, but how? As if nothing else made sense. And then, the message came. A short message, coming from her number. "Please don't do this. Let's talk." I looked at those words flashing on the screen, and something inside me burned. Did she think it was that simple? Did you think a conversation request would solve everything? The cell phone shook again. "I beg you. Don't take me away from my children. She still didn't understand. She still hadn't realized the damage she had caused. But she would understand. She would feel firsthand what it was like to lose everything. The next morning, as I was drinking my coffee, I heard hurried footsteps in the driveway. The door slammed loudly, and then, the voice I didn't want to hear anymore. I won't accept this. You can't stop me from seeing my children. I stood up slowly, looked at her and saw desperation. I saw the dark circles, the messy hair, the red eyes from crying. But I didn't feel sorry. I felt relief. Relief at no longer being fooled. I already accepted. And you will have to accept it too. My voice was firm but calm. I had already made my decision. But she still didn't know what awaited her. She still didn't know what came next. She didn't yet know that the worst part of her punishment wasn't losing me. It was losing the most important person in her life. And that, I would guarantee. Welcome to the channel. Here, betrayal is neither romanticized nor justified. We do not support infidelity under any circumstances. The stories you will hear are fictional, but they reflect harsh reality. Betrayal destroys lives, families, and leaves irreversible marks. Each narrative carries a lesson, a warning, a profound impact. Now, get ready for a shocking, intense story full of twists and turns. Are you ready? So let's go. The wind blew gently between the white curtains of the large two-story house. The yellowish lights illuminated the living room, creating a cozy, almost nostalgic atmosphere. Sitting on the sofa, with a book in my hands, I flipped through the pages without really absorbing a single word. His gaze often strayed to the clock on the wall, watching the hands slowly move forward. It was already past 9 in the evening and Emma, his wife, had not yet arrived. It wasn't unusual for her to be late, as her job required occasional overtime, social events with clients, and unexpected meetings, but tonight there was something different. He felt an uneasiness deep in his chest that he couldn't explain. He got up, walked to the kitchen and filled a glass of water, trying to ignore the slight tension that was settling in his shoulders. The house was silent. The couple's children were already asleep. Lucas, the oldest, was 12 years old and always went to bed early because of school. Sophie, just 8, slept with a small lamp lit next to her bed, a habit she had since she was little. Michael enjoyed spending time with the children before bed, hearing about their days, their small achievements and problems that, to them, seemed huge. That was the kind of thing that gave him peace. The kind of thing that made all the effort worth it. But that night, peace seemed to slip through his fingers. Minutes later, the sound of the lock turning echoed through the house and Emma walked through the door, holding her purse and scrolling through her cell phone. Her brown hair fell perfectly over her shoulders, and her sweet scent filled the air. When she noticed her husband's gaze, she smiled, but it was a quick, almost mechanical smile. Michael noticed the way she looked away, the rush to take off her shoes and the way her body seemed tense. This was new. Normally, she would arrive tired, but always with a sparkle in her eyes, always with that affectionate way, complaining about the traffic or telling us something funny that happened at work. But not that night. Emma seemed distracted. Distant. Michael didn't want to create paranoia. After so many years together, he trusted her. But at the same time, something inside him stirred. He watched her sideways as she walked up the stairs in silence, without even asking about the children, something she did every night. He took his cell phone from his pocket and, without thinking much, sent a message, "Is everything okay?" Seconds later, she heard the sound of the notification coming from the room, but Emma didn't respond. The days went by normally, but Michael began to notice small changes. Details that perhaps, in another era, he would have ignored. Emma spent more time on her cell phone, and when he got close, she quickly blocked the screen, saying it was just work. She started to dress up more to go out, wore perfumes that she didn't usually wear and, on some nights, came home late without giving much explanation. But there were always justifications. There was always a plausible reason. And Michael wanted to believe that it was just that his mind was playing tricks, that it was all just accumulated tiredness and baseless paranoia. Their marriage had always been solid. Since their college days, when they met, they have built a story based on respect and companionship. Michael has always prided himself on being a present husband, on giving his wife and children a stable and happy life. He worked hard so that nothing was ever missing, he sacrificed weekends to ensure financial security for his family, always putting their well-being above all else. He loved Emma with an intensity that never diminished, not even with the years and the exhausting routine. But over the past few months, the feeling that something was slipping through his fingers had been growing inside him. Emma, in turn, seemed to be living at a different pace. The sparkle in her eyes when she saw him was no longer the same. The long kisses had become quick pecks, and the conversations that used to flow easily now seemed forced, as if her head was always somewhere else. Michael tried not to show it, but every time she left without saying exactly where she was going, a tightness would fill his chest. He didn't want to be that kind of jealous, controlling man who invades his wife's privacy. But what if something was really wrong? That Friday, as he watched Emma get ready to go out again, something inside him broke. He watched her in silence, watching her apply lipstick in front of the mirror, fix her hair and put on a new dress. It was a small detail, but Michael remembered it well, that dress had never been worn before. It was new, elegant, close to the body. He fought the feeling that he was witnessing something that shouldn't be happening. But he couldn't ignore it. "Where are you going today?" he asked, trying to keep his voice neutral. Emma took a while to respond, as if she was choosing her words carefully. "Dinner with some friends from work." The answer came too quickly, too rehearsed. Michael didn't respond. He just nodded. But something inside him said that wasn't the truth. That night he couldn't sleep. He turned from side to side in bed, listening to the silence of the house and feeling the empty space next to him. Time passed, the hours dragged by, and Emma still hadn't returned. The cell phone was on the nightstand, and Michael was tempted to pick up the device and call her, but something stopped him. The reason? He already knew that, whatever the answer, it wouldn't change what he was feeling. And then, just after midnight, he heard the door open. The sound of heels echoed through the hallway. He lay there, eyes closed, waiting. He heard Emma sigh, heard the sound of objects being left on the dresser. He felt the bed dip slightly as she lay down next to him. But something was different. The perfume, the smell of the environment around her, was different. Michael remained motionless, eyes closed, without saying a single word. At that moment, he realized that the doubt no longer existed. What was once just an uncomfortable feeling now felt like a cruel, throbbing certainty that was impossible to ignore. Something was happening. Something was changing. And he knew that sooner or later the truth would come out. He just didn't imagine that, when that happened, his life would never be the same. That uncomfortable feeling grew inside Michael every day. It wasn't just suspicion, it was something visceral, a primal instinct that whispered in her ear every time Emma left the house with generic excuses. Every time she avoided his eyes, every time she moved away for no apparent reason, certainty solidified within him. But he didn't want to believe it. I couldn't. Their marriage was the basis of his life, the only certainty he had amid the chaos of the world. If this fell apart, what would be left? The days passed, and Emma's routine became more predictable in its unpredictability. She left early, returned late, her schedule always filled with meetings, business dinners, social events. When he was at home, he seemed absent, as if he was only there physically but his mind was somewhere else. Michael tried to ignore it, tried to find plausible reasons for all the changes, but his mind refused to accept empty excuses. He knew he needed proof, something concrete, something that would confirm or destroy his suspicions once and for all. That night, as Emma prepared to leave again, Michael took in every detail. The tight dress, the perfume he didn't recognize, the meticulously styled hair. It wasn't the kind of production she would make for a dinner with coworkers. It was something more. Something that made his chest tighten in an almost unbearable way. He waited for her to leave, heard the sound of the car engine fading into the distance, and then grabbed his jacket. His heart was beating fast, his hands were cold. Never before in his life had he followed anyone, never felt the need to distrust the woman he chose to spend the rest of his life with. But there he was, driving through the night streets, keeping a safe distance, feeling his stomach drop with every kilometer he covered. Her car stopped outside a fancy restaurant, the kind of place where couples celebrate anniversaries, where marriage proposals are made, where promises are exchanged under the dim candlelight. Michael pulled the car into a discreet space, watching from a distance. His heart hammered in his chest as he watched Emma get out of the car, straighten her dress, look around as if to make sure she wasn't being watched. Then, he appeared. A tall, well-dressed man who greeted her with an easy smile. They exchanged a few words, and then he held her hand, guiding her into the restaurant. Michael felt his body freeze for a moment. Everything around seemed to lose sound, as if the world had pressed the silence button. He blinked a few times, trying to process what he saw, trying to find some rational explanation for it. But there wasn't. That was all he needed to know. Everything he feared was happening right before his eyes. Without thinking, he got out of the car, his heavy footsteps echoing on the concrete floor. His legs were shaky, his stomach twisted in a mix of anger and disbelief. He entered the restaurant, his eyes quickly scanning the room until he found them. Sitting at a private table, laughing, exchanging complicit glances. Emma held a glass of wine, her fingers delicately sliding across the glass while the man in front of her smiled as if he were in front of the most enchanting woman in the world. Then, it happened. The man took a small velvet box out of his pocket, placed it on the table and opened it. Inside, a ring glittered in the restaurant's soft light. Emma's eyes widened, she brought her hand to her mouth in surprise. Michael didn't need to hear the words that came out of the man's mouth. He didn't need to see Emma's full reaction. He already knew what that meant. This wasn't just a case. It wasn't just an adventure. It was something much worse. Emma wasn't just betraying her marriage, she was betraying everything they'd built together, betraying the history they shared, betraying the family they swore to protect. He walked to the table, feeling each heartbeat like thunder inside his chest. Emma's eyes met his, and in that instant, time seemed to stop. His face turned pale, his lips parted without any sound coming out. The man next to her frowned, confused. Michael stopped in front of the table, looked at the ring shining inside the box, looked at Emma, and then spoke. His voice came out firm, stronger than he expected. Marry him. But don't come after me anymore and don't even want to see my children. You've just destroyed everything. Silence took over the restaurant. Some people tried to hide it, looking away, others looked at the scene without shame. Emma's eyes widened, as if she had been hit. Michael, no, wait. His voice trailed off, his hands were shaking. But he didn't want to listen anymore. I didn't want excuses, I didn't want empty explanations. The man next to her began to fidget, trying to find words, but Michael didn't even look at him. Everything he needed to say had already been said. He turned and walked outside, feeling the cold night air against his warm face. His steps were steady, but his insides were crumbling. The pain was suffocating, but at the same time, freeing. He no longer needed to live in doubt, in the anguish of wondering if it was just in his head. Now he knew the truth. And the truth was brutal. As he got into the car, his hands gripping the steering wheel tightly, his gaze was lost on the horizon. Something inside him said that this betrayal was just the surface of something much bigger. Something he hadn't yet discovered. But this was about to come to a head. The weight of betrayal still burned in Michael's chest as he drove aimlessly through the deserted streets. The silence of the car amplified the thoughts that clashed inside him. Every image of that night replayed in his mind like a nightmare he couldn't wake up from: Emma's look of surprise, the shine of the ring inside that small velvet box, the words he had said coming out like sharp blades. But there was something beyond the pain, something that bothered him even more. The way Emma reacted, the desperation in her eyes, the tremor in her voice. This wasn't just guilt. It was fear. Fear of something he didn't yet understand. He parked in front of the house, but did not get out of the car immediately. He took a deep breath, feeling the weight of everything that had happened that night crushing his shoulders. He thought of his children sleeping inside, oblivious to the disaster unfolding around them. He thought about what would come next, the questions he would have to answer, the new reality he needed to accept. When he finally got out of the car and entered the house, he was greeted by absolute silence. Each room seemed colder, emptier. He slowly went up the stairs, opened the bedroom door and felt a tightness in his chest when he saw the bed still intact, as if the day hadn't started and ended in a devastating way. He threw himself onto the mattress, exhausted, but he knew sleep wouldn't come. He stayed there, staring at the ceiling, until tiredness overcame him. The morning arrived bringing a reality that he didn't want to face. His cell phone vibrated insistently on the bedside table. He picked up the device and saw several missed calls from Emma. Ignored them all. He stood up and felt the weight of his body heavier than ever. He took a quick shower, got dressed without thinking too much and went down to the kitchen. But before he even reached the coffee maker, he heard the sound of the door slamming shut. His heart raced, and when he turned around, he saw Emma standing there, with her eyes red and puffy, her hair messy as if she hadn't slept. There was desperation in his posture, in the trembling hands that were brought together in supplication. He crossed his arms, standing firm. I didn't want to hear excuses, I didn't want explanations that wouldn't change anything. But Emma moved forward, her voice cracking at first before gaining strength. Please listen to me. I know you hate me right now, I know you don't want to see me, but I need to tell you something. Something you don't know. Something that changes everything. Michael kept his gaze fixed on her, his face impassive. Does it change everything? What can change the fact that you were there, receiving a marriage proposal from another man? What can change the fact that you betrayed me, that you destroyed our family? His voice was loaded, full of anger, frustration, hurt. But Emma didn't back down. Instead, he took a deep breath, his lips trembling before he finally released the words that seemed to burn him inside. Lucas is not your son. The world around him seemed to stop. Everything was silent. Her words echoed in his head, but his mind refused to process them. He blinked, hoping it was a mistake, some hallucination caused by exhaustion and anger. But Emma was still there, looking at him with guilt and despair, waiting for him to say something. He laughed, a bitter, humorless laugh, a laugh of incredulity. What? The word was low, but carried with an overwhelming weight. Emma took a step forward, her voice shakier now. I need you to listen to me. I never wanted it to be like this. I never wanted you to find out this way. But it's true. Lucas is not your son, Michael. The shock was like a punch in the stomach. His entire body went rigid, as if he had been struck physically. His gaze was lost, his thoughts were confused. He felt a wave of nausea rise up his throat. No. No. You're lying. But he knew deep down that he wasn't. He knew it by the way she looked at him, by the way her voice cracked. Emma put her hands in her head, tears streaming down her face. I was wrong. I was wrong, Michael. I cheated on you in the past, years ago, before we were officially married. I was confused, I didn't know what I wanted, I was weak. But when I found out I was pregnant, I already loved you, I already wanted to be with you, and I thought I could move on, that I could leave it buried. Because you were always the best father to him, because you were always the right man for this family. But now everything has fallen apart and I couldn't hide it any longer." Michael's heart hammered inside his chest. Her every word was like a knife being plunged into his flesh. He closed his eyes for a moment, trying to control the storm inside him. But there was no control. There was no logic. There was only chaos. He looked at her, his eyes once full of love now carrying a haunting emptiness. "You made me raise a child that isn't mine. You made me love him as my own without ever telling me the truth." His voice was hoarse, broken by the weight of discovery. Emma sobbed, covering her face with her hands. "I know I was selfish. I know I was wrong. But that doesn't change who you are to him. He loves you, Michael. You're his father, no matter what." But it changed everything. Michael felt his legs weaken and he had to lean on the counter to keep from falling. All the memories with Lucas flashed through her mind. The first day of school, the football games, the nights you put him to sleep, the conversations about life, the promises that you would always be there for him. And now all of that was built on a lie. His entire world was cracked, about to completely fall apart. He ran his hands over his face, trying to find a way out, trying to find some answer to it all. But he only found silence. He only found an emptiness that seemed to grow inside him, consuming everything that was once solid. Emma was still crying in front of him, but he couldn't see her the same way anymore. He could no longer look at her without feeling the pain of everything that had been ripped from him. Lucas was not his son. His marriage was a lie. His life was an illusion. And now, he needed to decide what to do with it all. Michael remained motionless for long seconds, perhaps minutes, perhaps an eternity. His chest rose and fell irregularly, his breathing hitched by the avalanche of emotions that swallowed him. The silence between him and Emma was heavy, suffocating, as if the air inside that house had become too thick to breathe. Her eyes were fixed on him, full of tears and despair, but he could no longer look at her the same way. She was no longer the woman he had built a life with, no longer the person he believed he knew. She was a walking lie, a fake that took him years to uncover. He ran his tongue over his dry lips, trying to find a word, anything that could convey what he felt. But there were no words. There was no explanation that was enough to sew up the open wound that now throbbed in his chest. His gaze wandered around the kitchen, as if searching for something solid to lean on, as if he needed a fixed point to prevent his world from completely collapsing. But everything around him felt strange now, as if he were in a home that was no longer his, a life that no longer belonged to him. Then, without warning, he moved. He walked past Emma without even touching her, without giving her one last look. He climbed the stairs with firm, almost trembling steps and entered Lucas's room. The boy was sleeping soundly, the blankets bunched up around his body, his breathing calm and rhythmic. Michael felt a tightness in his throat. How many times had he stopped at that door just to watch him sleep? How many times had he entered that room to tell stories, to calm nightmares, to promise that he would always be there, protecting him? And now? Who was he to that boy? His stomach turned, and a bitter taste rose in his throat. He approached slowly, kneeling beside the bed. He observed every feature of the boy's face, looking for something familiar, some similarity that could prove Emma wrong. But he didn't find it. And that was what hurt the most. He wanted to see himself in that boy. I wanted to find a trace of myself in the features he loved so much. But now, all he saw was an emptiness that he had never noticed before. Lucas stirred slightly, letting out a sleepy murmur before snuggling back into the sheets. Michael swallowed hard. His chest hurt like it was being crushed from the inside out. He stood up slowly, his legs heavy as lead, and took one last look at the boy before leaving the room. As she closed the door, she felt more distant from him than ever. When he went downstairs, he found Emma exactly where he had left her. His eyes were swollen, his shoulders were slumped, his arms were crossed in a failed attempt to protect himself from the weight of what he had confessed. But he didn't feel sorry. He couldn't feel it. What she had done was unforgivable. "Have you told him that yet?" Michael's voice was lower than he'd expected, but filled with something cutting. Emma shook her head, wiping away the tears that were still streaming down her face. "No. I never had the courage. To him, you were always the father. And I didn't want that to change." Michael let out a bitter laugh. "Didn't you want it to change? You didn't want it to change because it was convenient for you. Because it was easier to carry that lie than face the consequences of it." He approached, stopping in front of her. "You made me live a lie. You made me love a child that was never mine. You made me raise a child that belongs to another man, while I thought we were building a family together." Emma sobbed, clutching her arms to her body. "But you love him. You know you do. That doesn't change anything, Michael. You were always his father. You were always the man who took care of him, who was there, who taught him everything he knows. What does it matter if he has another man's blood running through his veins?" He interrupted her, his voice thick with pain and anger. "It matters. Because this isn't just about him. This is about me. About everything I was to you, about who we were. I lived a lie and didn't even have the chance to choose. You took that from me. You stole my right to know the truth. You made me believe this family was real. But now I see that none of that was ever really mine." She stepped forward, trying to touch his arm, but he stepped back, his expression cold and hard. "Michael, please, I'm begging you. Don't do this to him. Don't do this to us. I know I was wrong, I know I destroyed everything, but Lucas isn't to blame. He loves you like a father, because you're the only father he knows." Michael closed his eyes for a moment, feeling the storm inside him grow even more. He knew Lucas wasn't to blame. I knew the boy was innocent in all of this. But he couldn't just erase what he had just discovered. I couldn't look at him the same way. "I need to get out of here," he said, voice barely above a whisper. Emma's eyes widened, her despair becoming palpable. "No, Michael. Please. Stay. Let's figure this out together. Let's figure out a way to make things right." But he had already decided. He picked up the car keys from the table, took one last look at the house that now seemed strange and empty, and walked out the door without looking back. The cold night air hit his face, but he felt nothing but the pain that burned inside him. He got into the car, started the engine and drove aimlessly, trying to escape what he had just discovered. But he knew there was no escape. It would always be there, inside him, slowly consuming him. The dark road stretched out before him, but he didn't know where he was going. "I just knew I couldn't stay. Not now. Not after all." His world had fallen apart, and he needed to find a way to pick up the pieces. But one thing was certain, nothing would ever be the same again. The road seemed endless, an empty path with no destination. Michael drove without knowing where he was going, without a plan, without any prospect of the future. The city lights were behind him, and the silence around him only echoed the chaos within him. His chest felt heavy, as if each breath required superhuman effort. The revelation still swirled inside his mind like a hurricane. Every time he tried to absorb the truth, he felt his body reject it. It was as if something was eating away at his soul from within, as if his own past was being undone before his eyes. He stopped the car on the side of the road, took a deep breath and rubbed his face hard, as if he could erase what he had heard, as if he could undo the damage that one sentence had caused. The early morning cold came in through the half-open window, but he barely felt it. His mind was elsewhere, revisiting every moment of the last 12 years, every memory with Lucas, every time he held that child in his arms, every time he called him son, every promise that he would always be there to protect him. And now? Now he no longer knew who he was, he no longer knew what his role was, he no longer knew if that child was really his in some way or if all that had been an illusion built on the worst of lies. His cell phone vibrated on the car dashboard. He knew it was Emma. Since leaving home, the phone hasn't stopped ringing. He ignored every call, refusing to hear any more lies, any more apologies that wouldn't change anything. But at that moment, it was different. The screen glowed with a name that made his heart squeeze even more. Lucas. He stood there, looking at his son's name, or at least, the boy he believed to be his son. His hands were shaking when he picked up the device. His mind screamed at him not to answer, to hang up and avoid the conversation, but something inside him couldn't. His voice was low, hoarse, almost a whisper when he answered. Hey. On the other end of the line, the silence lasted a few seconds before Lucas's voice sounded, hesitant, full of confusion. Dad. Where are you? The sound of that word hit him like a knife. Good. It was still called that, but for how long? Could he still consider himself a father after the truth he discovered? Could he continue to be that boy's father figure without feeling the shadow of that lie hovering between them? Michael took a deep breath, trying to keep his voice steady, but failing. I needed to get out for a bit, son. Lucas took a while to respond, as if he was choosing his words carefully. Mommy is crying. She doesn't want to tell me what happened, but I know something is wrong. Did I do something? The innocence in the boy's voice made Michael's chest tighten even more. He couldn't just dump that truth on him. Lucas wasn't to blame. He didn't ask to be born into a lie, he didn't ask to be put into a game he didn't even know was being played. He squeezed his eyes shut, holding the pain inside. No, son. You didn't do anything. Those words came out carrying an indescribable weight. Just, give me some time, okay? I need to think. Lucas remained silent for a few seconds before muttering an okay and hanging up. Michael stood there, holding his cell phone to his forehead, trying to control the storm inside him. But there was no control. There was no easy way out of that situation. Hours later, when dawn was already disappearing on the horizon, he decided to return. Not because I wanted to, but because I needed to face it. Driving aimlessly wasn't going to solve anything, and as much as I hated the idea of looking at Emma again, I knew I couldn't just run away from it forever. When he parked in the garage, he hesitated before getting out of the car. The lights were still on, and he knew Emma was waiting for him. He took a deep breath before entering. She was in the living room, sitting on the couch, her face swollen from crying. When she saw him, she got up immediately, as if she were afraid he was going to disappear again. Michael. His voice was weak, almost pleading. But he raised his hand, stopping her. I don't want to hear excuses. I don't want any more justifications. I just want to know one thing. His voice was firm but tired. Who is the father? Emma closed her eyes for a second before responding. Does it matter? He laughed, but there was no humor in his laugh. It fucking matters. She ran her hands over her face, hesitated before finally blurting out the truth. It's a man who means nothing now. Someone I knew before I married you. I never saw him again. I never had contact with him again. Michael crossed his arms, trying to hold back the anger that still boiled inside him. So you let me raise a son who has the blood of a stranger, knowing that all along? Knowing that there was another man out there who could be his father? She started crying again, but he had no more patience for tears. I thought I was protecting everyone. You, him, our family. I thought if I pretended Lucas was yours, that if I went through with the lie, no one would ever need to get hurt. He ran his hands through his hair, feeling an overwhelming exhaustion wash over him. What now? Now that the truth is out, what do you expect from me? Emma sobbed, holding her body as if trying to keep from falling apart. I just want you not to leave. That you don't abandon him. That, despite everything, you continue to be the father he knows. Because you're the only father he has. Her words echoed inside him. He wanted to scream that he couldn't live with this lie, that every time he looked at Lucas he would see betrayal, he would see the cruel truth that that boy was never his. But at the same time, he knew he couldn't just disappear from the boy's life. Lucas loved him. And despite all the pain, he loved Lucas too. The dilemma settled like a shadow inside him. Stay and continue living this farce, or leave and destroy a boy who was not to blame for anything. He had no answer. I didn't know how to go from there. But one thing was certain. Nothing would be the same again. And any decision he made would carry scars that would never disappear. The silence between Michael and Emma was like an invisible wall, separating them more than any physical distance could. He remained there, standing still, his arms crossed, his eyes fixed on her without really seeing her. The room that was once the heart of the home now felt cold, strange, as if it no longer belonged to him. Emma was still crying, but her tears were no longer effective. He had seen pain in her eyes before, but this was different. It was a despair that went beyond regret, it was fear. Fear of losing something that she herself destroyed. Michael took a deep breath, fighting to maintain the composure that seemed to be crumbling by the second. What if he finds out? The question was heavy, loaded with everything he feared. If one day he finds out that I'm not his biological father, what do you think will happen? Do you really think you'll be able to hide this from him forever? Emma pursed her lips, hesitated, as if that possibility were a nightmare from which she refused to wake up. He doesn't need to know. He doesn't have to know. What would that change? You were always his father. What matters is who was by his side all these years, who raised him, who loves him. Michael let out a bitter laugh, shaking his head. What matters is the truth, Emma. What matters is that you took away the choice to know this from the beginning. I spent 12 years believing in something that wasn't real. What now? Now I have to carry this truth alone. Pretend it never happened. I don't know if I can do that. I don't know if I can look at him and not feel this hole inside me. Emma took a step forward, her eyes pleading. Do you think you won't feel it if you change? Do you think you won't notice? Michael, please. He's just a kid. He loves you. He looks at you like a hero, like the man he wants to be one day. Are you just going to turn your back on him? Michael closed his eyes for a moment, feeling the weight of the decision crushing his shoulders. He wanted to escape, he wanted to erase this history, he wanted to go back in time and never have heard that revelation. But he couldn't. It was there, it was real, and there was no escaping it. He opened his eyes again and looked at Emma, his expression hardened. This has nothing to do with him. This has to do with you. With what you did. With the lie you carried for years like it was nothing. I look at Lucas and I see an innocent boy. But I look at you and I see a woman who destroyed everything we built together. His words cut like blades, and Emma flinched, as if she had been struck physically. But she didn't give up. I know I hurt you in a way I may never be able to fix. I know nothing I say will erase what I did. But if there's still something left in you, something other than anger, I beg you, don't destroy Lucas's world for something I did. He doesn't deserve this. Michael ran his hands over his face, feeling exhaustion taking over every muscle in his body. He needed to think. He needed to get out of there before he said something that couldn't be unsaid. Without another word, he grabbed the car keys and left, leaving Emma behind, swallowed by her own despair. The night was cold when he got into the car and drove aimlessly, his thoughts weighing as much as Emma's words. He didn't know where to go, he didn't know who to look for. For a moment, he thought about just disappearing, getting on a plane and leaving everything behind, but then he remembered Lucas. Of the boy who slept in the house he called home, hoping everything would be okay when he woke up. He couldn't just disappear. He couldn't be a coward. Without realizing it, he drove to the park where he used to take Lucas when he was younger. He pulled over and stood there, looking at the empty swings swaying gently in the wind. How many times had he pushed Lucas on those swings? How many laughs had I heard there, how many happy moments had been shared in that same place? The memory made his chest tighten even more. The truth was cruel, but there was something even crueler, the possibility of losing that bond forever. The dawn was approaching when he picked up his cell phone and dialed a number he hadn't called in years. The phone rang a few times before a hoarse voice answered. Michael? What the hell, do you know what time it is? Era Daniel, his best friend from college days. The last person he wanted to call, but the only one he could trust right now. I need to talk to you. Michael's voice was tired, heavy. There was a brief silence before Daniel responded. Okay. Where are you? Old Park, the one on the main street. Give me 20 minutes. Michael hung up and stood there, waiting. The early morning chill seemed to penetrate his bones, but he didn't care. He felt nothing but the knot forming in his stomach. When Daniel arrived, with a jacket thrown haphazardly over his shoulders and his hair messy from interrupted sleep, he didn't need long to realize that something was terribly wrong. You look terrible, Daniel commented, sitting next to him on the wooden bench. Tell me this has nothing to do with Emma. Michael let out a humorless laugh. It has everything to do with her. Daniel crossed his arms, eyes attentive. What happened? Michael hesitated for a moment before telling him everything. Every detail. The betrayal. The secret. The devastating revelation. He told it without filters, without hiding how destroyed he was, without disguising the pain he carried. When he finished, Daniel fell silent, looking at the floor as if he was trying to process everything. Fuck, man. He finally said, shaking his head. I don't even know what to say. This is fucking heavy. Michael let out a long sigh, running his hands through his hair. I don't know what to do, Dan. I love that boy. I love him like he's my own. But now I don't know who I am to him anymore. I don't know if I can keep pretending like nothing happened. Daniel was thoughtful for a moment before speaking. You don't have to pretend anything. But you also don't have to make this decision right now. You're in the eye of the storm, man. Give yourself some time. Process this. Lucas loves you. You're still his father, regardless of what the DNA says. But I understand that doesn't change the shit that Emma did. Michael closed his eyes for a moment, feeling the weight of those words. He wanted to hate Emma, he wanted to erase her from his life, but he knew it was impossible. She was part of his story, his family, and no matter how much he wanted to rip her away, there would always be scars. The dawn was advancing, and he knew that, sooner or later, he would have to return home and face reality again. But now, at least for a few hours, he just wanted to breathe. He just wanted to exist without the weight of the decision that awaited him. Because deep down, he knew that any choice he made would change his life forever. The sun rose timidly when Michael parked the car in front of the house that, for so long, had been his refuge. He remained there for a few minutes, his hands firmly on the steering wheel, breathing deeply as if he needed to gather the strength to cross that door again. Everything inside him screamed that nothing there was his anymore, that home was now just a place full of lies and unbearable pain. But there was still Lucas. There was the boy who never asked to be in the middle of this hurricane, who was still there, waiting for him, without understanding the scale of the storm unfolding around him. And it was for him that Michael needed to make his decision. When he finally entered, the house was silent. Emma slept on the couch, her eyes swollen, her breathing heavy. He didn't feel sorry. He just watched for a moment before heading up the stairs. In the hallway, Lucas's bedroom door was ajar, and he allowed himself a peek. The boy was still sleeping, the blankets bunched up around his body, his expression calm, completely oblivious to the fact that his world was about to change. Michael approached, sat on the edge of the bed and gently ran his hand through his hair. His chest tightened as he thought that this could be one of the last moments like this. But he couldn't run away. Lucas stirred, his eyes slowly opening until they met Michael's. A sleepy smile appeared on the boy's face. "Dad, you're back." Michael felt a lump in his throat. That word was everything to him, but now it was also a cruel reminder of the lie that surrounded him. "Yes, son, I'm back." Lucas rubbed his eyes, still trying to wake up. "Mommy said you just needed some time, you're not leaving again, right?" Michael felt pain rip through his chest. How could I look at that boy and say that nothing would be the same as before? How could I leave him without the father he had always known? He took a deep breath before responding. "Lucas, there's something I need to tell you." The boy's expression changed. His body tensed, as if he felt something was wrong. Michael hesitated, the words feeling heavy on his tongue, but he knew he needed to say them. "You know that I will always love you, right? That nothing will ever change that." Lucas nodded, confused. "What happened, Dad?" Michael swallowed hard. "It just so happened. I discovered something that made me very sad. Something I never imagined. But it has nothing to do with you, and I want you to understand that." Lucas sat on the bed, looking at him with attentive eyes. "Are you and Mom going to break up?" The question took Michael by surprise, but at the same time, he knew it was inevitable. "Yes, son. Let's go. But it doesn't change how I feel about you. I'll always be here for you, no matter what." The boy bit his lip, thoughtfully. "But you're not going to live here anymore." Michael shook his head, and the sadness in Lucas' eyes was the final blow. "I didn't want this to happen, but if you promise that you'll still see me, that you'll still pick me up from school, that we'll still play ball together, then it'll be fine." Michael felt a tear run down his face. He didn't want Lucas to suffer. But it was impossible to avoid. What mattered now was making sure he didn't feel like he was being abandoned. "I promise, son. Nothing will change between us." The boy nodded slowly and, without saying anything else, threw himself into Michael's arms, hugging him tightly. And at that moment, Michael knew his decision was made. In the days that followed, he moved into a small apartment. It wasn't a big house, it wasn't the home he built, but it was a fresh start. Emma tried, in every way, to convince him to stay. She tried to say that they could get through everything together, but he didn't want to listen. For him, that marriage died the moment the truth came out. She cried, she begged, she said she would do anything to make it right, but Michael no longer saw a future there. All that was left between them was an unbreakable bond through Lucas, and nothing more. Little by little, he rebuilt his routine. His work went on, his life went on, but something inside him still felt broken. On the weekends, Lucas would go to his new apartment, and Michael would try, as best he could, to make him feel like he still had a home with him. It was difficult. But they were adapting. One day at a time. And then, months later, he met her. Sophie. It wasn't planned, it wasn't something he was looking for. But she appeared, with a kind smile and a light energy unlike anything he had known before. At first, he was afraid. Fear of opening up, fear of trusting, fear of believing in something new. But Sophie was patient, she knew how to wait, she knew how to enter her life naturally. Lucas liked her. That was what mattered. And, little by little, Michael realized that it was possible to move forward. That the pain of the past didn't need to define your future. That there was something more waiting for him. Emma, on the other hand, never fully recovered. She continued living, but always carrying the weight of what she lost. He tried to find comfort in other relationships, he tried to rebuild his life, but nothing was the same as before. She saw Michael happy, she saw Lucas right next to his father, and she knew that it would never be hers again. His biggest mistake was believing that the truth would never come out. But it came. And she paid the price. In the end, everyone followed a different path. But the most important thing for Michael was knowing that, despite everything, he still had something valuable, Lucas. And, over time, he understood that fatherhood was not in the blood, but in love, in care, in presence. And that, no one could take away from him. Now tell me, what did you think of this story? Would you do it differently in Michael's place? Leave your opinion in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more stories like this. Here, betrayal is never romanticized. It destroys lives. Until next time.